Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode. Mark, I think we must be into double figures now, of La Piedra, our podcast, which is here to discuss all things Spanish property related. With me, I have Mark Stucklin, who's Spanish Property Insight, who's the go-to guy for all things stats and market reports and analysis. I'm Sean Woolley, Managing Director of Cloud9 Spain. We're a real estate company down here on the Costa del Sol. So between us, we look at the stats, we look at what the official figures are telling us, and then we look at what's actually happening on the ground and whether the two align. Mark, how are you doing?
Very well, thank you, Sean. Good to see you again after the summer.
Yeah, and you, sir, and you. And today we're going to be talking about the latest stats that have come out, which should give us some a little overview of what's happening with the market, whether it's cooling down or warming up. And then we're also going to be talking about a hot topic at the moment, which is the topic of branded residences, which is seems to be all over Marbella at the moment, certainly. So be happy to talk about that because it's something that we're getting asked about all the time by clients, and obviously we're dealing with about 4 or 5 different products down here that are affiliated with a worldwide brand. So it'd be good to touch on that. So let's start off, Mark. What are the figures telling us about the market? What's been happening so far this year?
So with the latest MITMA data, it's quite interesting to see what's going on. So here we have it for all sales were down. So that's the entire Spanish market in terms of volume of sales was down 14% in the second quarter.
So 14. So that's down on what? On the same time last year or the previous quarter?
It's all I'm going to talk about is year on year.
Okay,
so annualized. So 14% down to a total of 170,000 sales, which was 14% lower than the same time last year. Now, how does that break down into segments? First of all, let's have the overall foreign market. So that's every sale that involved a foreign buyer. And I guess that means, so I don't know, without going into the details of how they actually deal with like companies buying properties and people with dual nationality. But anyway, I guess it's whatever's on the escritura where the buyer is not a Spanish national.
Sure.
And so foreign sales were down 9% on the same time last year in the second quarter. And this is a little bit more than in the first quarter. I haven't got the Q1 figures. We can go and look at them a bit. I can bring them up a bit later. But the downward trend is accelerating. It is, but it's not particularly steep, but it's definitely accelerating. But whilst I'm talking about all of this, always bear in mind that we're talking about compared to like an amazingly buoyant market last year. So 9% down on last year is actually, I think, the second best quarter on record. So it sounds like it's down, but it's only relative to an exceptional year. It's actually much better than most normal years before the pandemic. So,
Mark, what are the figures like for traditional foreigner buyer hotspots? So places like Costa del Sol, Costa Blanca, Costa Cálida, maybe the Balearics and the Canaries. Is there any pattern emerging from those markets, particularly with foreign buyers?
But I can tell you the overall picture is the same, which is more or less declining compared to last year, but still very, very strong, a very healthy by the standards of any year before the pandemic. I think this the best year compared to any year before the pandemic, or one of the best. So a decline compared to last year, but not at all bad. The figures. That's the overall picture from most areas. There'll be exceptions, like the Balearics are having a problem, but that's a different story.
Ooh.
And because local politics and local politicians can do damage and can have an impact on how the region is seen from abroad, and they send a signal if they win the Balearics that up until the recent local elections they've been sending a signal: we don't want you here, go away, we hate you. People picked up on that signal. We're going to tax you to death. I mean, that wasn't I retract that. And some of the highest taxes on property purchase. When you put it all together, people kind of respond to that.
So in terms of the buying figures, then, if we combine obviously national buyers and international buyers, so the general trend is down. Are there any anomalies amongst that?
Murcia up 13%. Everyone's doing relatively well compared to previous years, except for last year. But Murcia has been doing particularly well.
I think Murcia, I know Murcia very well, and I think it's because there's a huge amount of land there. The land is still relatively cheap. So there's still room to expand. If you look at the more sort of predominantly coastal areas like Costa Blanca and the Costa del Sol, for instance, we're just running out of land. So everything is kind of going up in price. Whereas I think in Murcia, there's still genuine value. And by that, I mean the old, even 20 years ago, when the budget was still 100,000 for a holiday home, you can still get that in the Murcia region. So a lot of people are attracted to that. And I think that portion of the market is drawn there because they're priced out of other areas. So it doesn't surprise me that market is still on the rise. And I think you're right. What you said to counter these figures is to look at the fact that we're looking at annualized figures. We're looking at comparables to last year, and last year was so exceptional in terms of all the traditional sort of foreign buyer markets were. Well, they just exploded, didn't they? And I think that was because we were still servicing the post-COVID interest. People were able to travel again and they were able to buy. And I think, COVID, I know I go on about it a lot, but I think it did change a lot of people's perceptions of how they live their life and how they can live their life now. And obviously one of the main things is that a lot of people who are well-moneyed can now work from home, and they now trust their staff to self-manage, or they realize that they can spend more time abroad and then hop it back on a plane to maybe their business base. But they can provide their families with a much better quality of life in the Mediterranean basin. So I think we saw that last year, that glut of people who wanted that better life. And I think that still continued this year. I mean, our figures are really strong. We are doing as well, if not slightly better, than we did last year. So whether that's just we're the anomaly, I don't know. But I've also spoken to other agents here who are a little light on new inquiries, a little light on things coming through the door. So that doesn't surprise me, because I think the overall demand might be falling a little bit. But like you said, that's not a bad thing, because we're comparing it to a peak year last year. And I think if we looked at the figures of, like you said, the second quarter just gone is the second best second quarter on record, I think, which is fantastic. So although we're down from the record, we're still in a very, very healthy position, I think. So it's incredible how you interpret these figures, because of course the headline could be Spanish property market for overseas buyers is down by 20%, and everyone goes, well, I'm not buying in Spain because no one else is buying. But of course, there's still hundreds of thousands of people buying, and that's the key takeaway, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to give you, I mean, I agree. Absolutely agree with all you say. I was interesting to hear you say you're doing better than last year, because then we'll bring it right down to the local level on your patch in a second. Just to wrap up here, the national story is that, so it's down 40%, the foreign demand down 9%, expat demand down by 5%. So expats, people living in Spain, buying non-foreigners buying a property in Spain.
Yeah.
And then what I call second home buyers, foreign non-residents, so people who are not resident in Spain buying a property. So it's not, at the time of purchase, is not their main home, because they're not even resident in Spain. But I know that many people do that are buying a home today that may be a second home today, but in the future they plan to retire here or use it as a primary residence. And that was down 30% last year's boom, where second home buyers are falling more than another main home or a second home. So there's that clearly that, and the Spanish are down much more than the so Spanish demand is down 16%, so much stronger. The Spanish fall is much bigger than the foreign fall.
And why do you think that is?
Once again, it's down only compared to last year. And secondly, foreign markets are more diversified. Some go up, some go down, but there's always someone from somewhere is buying. And the Spanish market obviously is not diversified in that way. And I think that the problems with the rising interest rates and the economy, then Spain's got who hasn't got a cost of living crisis and struggling with these different forces. The Spanish economy has its problems, and they're just dealing with it. But once again, it's not so bad compared to any year other than last year.
Yeah. Okay. Good stuff. Shall we move on to our second topic of the day, branded residences?
Well, just before we do, let me give you.
Yeah.
Before we do that, let me just give you a quick.
Yes, the local.
The very local data on sales are in your area. So the West Costa del Sol, where we have Marbella, as usual, the biggest market by far, with 1,288 home sales recorded in Q2, followed by Mijas and Estepona, going down to Cáceres. Is it Cáceres or Casares? I never know.
Casares, yeah.
Casares, okay. And then, so Manilva was the only. Manilva and Casares were up compared to last year, 12% and 7% respectively. But then everyone else was heavily down. So 16% below last year in Fuengirola. Mijas was 23% down. Marbella was 26% down. So, but you said earlier that your figures are actually up. So despite a 25% decline, which is more than the national average, then you're actually you're up on last year. So what's going on there?
I know. What was the figure for Estepona and for Benavis?
Estepona was down 35%, and Benavis was down 26%.
Okay. Really interesting, isn't it? Because I would have expected Estepona to actually have less of a decline. But I suppose when you compare, and this is what we have to come back to all the time with these figures, is we're comparing them to last year. And last year, those areas were, thinking back now, those areas were a lot of sales activity. And maybe we just didn't have our fair share of the action last year.
You were really slow out of the blocks.
Yeah, maybe we just didn't get our cut of the action, and this year we have. So I don't know. It's really interesting because we felt as busy, if not busier, in quarter two, and quarter two. Yeah, looking at the figures from last year, we were in a healthier position and did better than we did last year. So I don't know. I mean, I'm guessing with the amount of agents in the territories here, that some would have had good results, some would have had bad results. There's over 2,000 of us, which is a crazy number. And I think, a 20%, 30% drop off in demand and in sales, but I think it will cause some pain for agents because, we're all very happy sharing the market, but obviously if you're reliant on one or two deals a year to survive, and all of a sudden you're down to 0 deals a year, then you're out of business. I think what we'll see is a changing real estate market, in that I think we're going to lose some people from it, people who aren't set up with their marketing and can't adapt quickly to a changing market. I think we'll lose some of those, maybe those one-man bands, because we can survive a 20% drop off. That's not an issue for us. I'd rather we didn't have to, but it's not an issue for us. The smaller one-man bands and people who rely on that very small volume of deals to get by, they're going to struggle.
Hand to mouth.
Yeah, and I think then we'll see a situation with the stronger real estate companies almost consolidating and maybe swallowing up those very good salespeople who've decided to go out on their own, and then we'll see a smaller number of agencies. But let's see where it heads.
Absolutely, yeah. But like you said, I mean, I was just looking at the Q2 figures last year, and so take Marbella, down 20%, 26% this year, but up last year at the same time it was up 61%. So it's all relative. I mean, it's not down to 0. It's just down to kind of like a normal level.
Okay, let's move on to branded residences. It's a hot topic. I was quoted recently in a Sunday Times article written by Zoe Darehall, which was lovely, and she wanted my opinion and thoughts on: is it something that people are buying? Is it catching a lot of attention? Before I give my 2 pence, what are your thoughts, Mark? Is it a welcome addition to the products on offer?
Well, I'm not a brand victim on the whole. I don't buy anything. I don't buy, certainly when it comes to the kind of brands that are showing up in the real estate sector, which are kind of clothing brands and car brands. I'm not very brand driven. So it's kind of a bit of a mystery for me. I mean, I would never buy at a place based on on some sort of brand link up. So I'd go on completely other, and I'm sure people who do buy, they're also looking at location and price and fixtures and things, not just the brand name that is associated with it. But so it's a bit of a mystery to me.
Yeah, you're probably not the target market then, because you're not a brand disciple. You wouldn't go to the ends of the earth to buy a Dolce & Gabbana house.
No. Certainly not to the end of the earth.
Fabulous.
But I would buy it. I mean, I don't, Dolce & Gabbana, from what I know, I'm not their target market anyway.
What the experts say is that a brand attached to a residence can increase the value of that residence by about by up to 30%. So the question is, would you pay 30% more to have a house that's branded by Dolce & Gabbana or a house that's unbranded? Branded residences, they're not new. It's something that's been done before. Over the last sort of 10 years, we've seen more and more of them being released, predominantly in places like London, Miami, and Dubai. And Marbella is kind of the next in line, really. And a lot of people are surprised that it's taken so long for these partnerships to emerge on the Costa del Sol. And what we've seen so far is we've seen collaborations with developers and design companies like Fendi Casa, Karl Lagerfeld, Dolce & Gabbana, Missoni, Lamborghini. So yeah, there's quite a few of them now entering the fray. And as you say, most of them are predominantly clothing brands that have become worldwide brands in terms of fashion and homeware. And then there's also the ones that are kind of outside of that, a bit like the car makers like Lamborghini, which design fabulous cars. And the Lamborghini design sort of studio have also had a say in a project here. So there's varying degrees of involvement with the brands. I know that they recently had the launch of the Design Hills by Dolce & Gabbana on the Golden Mile, near Sierra Blanca in Marbella. And the guys from Dolce & Gabbana, I think Domenico Dolce turned up along with his design people, and gave a speech, and they're very much involved in that project from the inception to the whole design build through. I mean, the prices reflect it, but it's nice to see that they're actually personally and humanly involved in that whole process. Whereas some of these residences, you get a feeling that maybe it's just a badge that they're sticking on to the side of a house, and how much kind of brand equity do you get in return for your investment? And I think, along with the fundamentals like location and value, I think that is a really important thing for buyers to bear in mind. One thing I would be questioning if I were in the market for a branded residence is, okay, who's the brand? Do I feel comfortable with that? Do I have some synergy with that? Do I respect it? Do I like it? Would I wear their clothes? Would I buy their perfume? And also, what part have they played? What are they just designing a wall covering or sticking a mirror in that they've designed, or are they actually involved in the architecture of the building? Are they happy to put their name and their face to this thing, or is it just a money maker? You know what I mean? So all those questions are really important.
I guess if it was a kind of a brand that related to my lifestyle or identified with, I would have a different opinion. I can't say. It's just Dolce & Gabbana. No, I wouldn't buy their clothes. I've got nothing against them. I just know that they don't want me in their shop. I doubt. Just because their target, I'm not their target. And so, but if it was, I don't know. Monte Cristo, then a Monte Cristo branded homes on the Costa del Sol, then I might be interested. What you're saying is there's clearly a premium.
Absolutely. And I think what's interesting is that each of these brands does have a following. So Monte Cristo would be, you be the target market. I don't know. For me, I mean, I'm wearing a Ralph Lauren shirt. Now, again, and it goes back to what does a brand mean? I mean, is this a Dolce? Sorry, is this a Ralph Lauren shirt, or is it just a shirt that's made in Bangladesh with a Ralph Lauren badge? And what does it, what does it actually mean? It's like an Armani T-shirt. Is it a T-shirt with Armani on, or is it an Armani design T-shirt? Who knows? And we can have those debates forever because that's a separate thing. But I think what each brand does have is it has a following. It has what I call disciples, who okay, they might not go to the ends of the earth, but they might have, for instance, a Lamborghini car, and they think, I love my Lamborghini car. I would love to have a house that's also designed by Lamborghini engineers. Dolce & Gabbana, they might have a wardrobe full of Dolce & Gabbana. They might have handbags, jewelry, perfume, and they think, yeah, I'd be interested in that. So I think what it does is it provides you with for these developers, it provides you with a ready-made buyer base. And indeed, what they do at these launches, we don't get invited. Well, I wasn't invited to the Dolce & Gabbana Design Hills launch. I'm far too unimportant to get on the guest list. But what they did have there was they had all the press, and they had specially invited clients of Dolce & Gabbana. So what does that tell you? If they can sell 20 or 30 units to their customer base, then they're off to a flying start, aren't they? So I think those clients that are their disciples understand the brand value. They understand that there's a decent amount of brand equity going into their investment, and they're happy to pay that premium. Me and you, old me and you, Mr. Grumpier, Mr. Grumpier, who would never go shopping in Dolce & Gabbana, it means nothing. But we're not the buyers, are we? Yeah. We're not the target market, like you said.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, I need to, that's why it's helpful to discuss it, because I need to change my mindset. Because if you just up front ask me, would I pay 30% more to buy the Dolce & Gabbana? No, I don't really understand why. But I can see now, as you say, there's disciples, there are people who love those brands. It's a way to get the, in terms of marketing, you can bring a Dolce & Gabbana development on the Costa Sol to the attention of people who are interested in Dolce & Gabbana in ways that, rather than just like advertising in the in sort of shotgun advertising. No, it's very targeted.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dolce & Gabbana presumably have.
Yeah, and it's the whole thing about branding is really interesting, isn't it? It's like if someone launched a homes by Ralph Lauren, I would be more interested because I own stuff by Ralph Lauren originally, already.
But doesn't he also do interior? I mean, well,
yeah, he does.
Doesn't Ralph Lauren? They certainly have this kind of, or maybe that's a manga set. This sort of Long Island, American chic feel, and they're certainly their advertising communicates. I've always thought that maybe they do at least some sort of soft furnishings.
Oh, they do. They have a big homeware section. It's a big part of their business. But the thing is, I mean, this is a natural kind of alliance, isn't it? Because if you imagine how many stores there are worldwide, if you imagine the website of all these companies, how many people have been through a Ralph Lauren store in the world in the last 10 years? I mean, if you imagine the data that they've got, and as I say, if you're willing to pay another, I don't know, $50 for a shirt with this logo on, then that's probably more than 30% of this shirt without the logo. So I'm kind of I'm talking myself into this brand thing, aren't I? And I think we all do it to a certain extent. We all like nice things, and we probably like to show off to our friends and family that we can, we're at a stage of our lives and maybe affordability that we can afford that sort of nice thing, whether it's a car or a house or a shirt or something like that. But actually, fundamentally, this, as I said, this is the same shirt that they probably sell in Primark. It probably isn't, but it's how far, what value does that brand give you? What equity does that brand give you? I think the biggest challenge for these developers is obviously these things work. If you're going to buy a one-bed apartment with, in Dolce & Gabbana Design Hills for nearly 3 million euros, that probably works because of where it is. It's in a prime position on the Golden Mile, next to Karl Lagerfeld, next to Epic by Fendi Casa. So you're in that kind of design village. But if you put a Dolce & Gabbana residence in the middle of a field, up in the middle of nowhere, then are people going to buy that? Would people be wise to buy that? So you've got the brand value, but then you've also got to fill the other, tick the other boxes, haven't you? It's got to be, if you're a 5-star brand and you're charging 3 million euros for a one-bed apartment, you can't be in the middle of a field in Gaucine. You've got, it's got to be a 5-star location.
Absolutely, it's got to tick all the other 5-star boxes as well. I think it's fair to say that in none of these cases is the brand the developer, right? They're just lending their name and greater or less extent, depending on the case, more or less involvement in the design process. But they're never doing the developer's role, which is finding the plot, getting the financing, specifying the product, like the actual town planning issues and all of that. They don't get involved in that at all, right? They're not developers.
Not at all. No, not at all. Not at all. And I think the challenge for these developers in tandem with the brands will be when they start building these 5-star priced properties in 4-star locations. Because then it's kind of then, will the public go with that? Will the public say, I love your brand so much, and I love the design so much, and I love the fact I've got a Missoni wall covering or a Lamborghini inspired swimming pool. but actually look around me. I'm not, and that's going to be the test. I think it's all very well selling in the 5-star area as a 5-star product with a 5-star price tag, because that people will go, okay, tick, tick, tick. Yeah, I'll do it. And then, you've got a nice, whatever it is, a Dolce & Gabbana or Fendi Casa home that you can resell with that premium. But when you're in a 4-star or even a 3-star location, you're not going to have the fundamentals in place. So I think for buyers, they just need to be careful if they're going to do this and go with a brand, and we're promoting them all, is where is it? Does it tick all those fundamentals that you would want ticked if you were buying any old place anyway? And secondly, how much of the brand equity are you getting? Is it someone that's just going to paint a wall in a color that's associated with the brand? Is it 2 mirrors? Is it a swimming pool design? Or is it someone who's really going to oversee the whole project and give you their brand heart and soul? That would appeal to me. The ones I've mentioned just before that wouldn't so much.
Yeah, well, how much brand identity is there in the product? And we're really talking about interior design. We're not talking about build or the floor plans or anything. Yeah. It's more, presumably that's what the developer does, or maybe in consultation. But I guess so. Some brands will add more value in the design than others, and some will just say, well, use my name and I'll give you some marketing help, or access to a database, and kind of leave it at that. And I presume the fees differ according. So how do people know? How would the clients know how much brand involvement or identity is involved in it when they look at these branded residences? I mean, you may know. I mean, someone knows, but how do clients find out about this?
I think you've got to do your research.
Whether it's just a badge or...
Yeah. I mean, I looked through the specifications of a development, and I won't name it because I don't want to be unfair to them, but I was waiting to see the mentions and the design of all of the brand. And it was like a mirror in the bathroom, a wall covering in the lounge, a wall covering in the bedroom. And it was kind of like, wow. But their name was tagged onto this development, and that really disappointed me. So I think people have got to do the research, and they've got to be guided by people like us, really, to say, look, in our opinion, you're getting a lot of the brand here. Okay, you're paying a big premium. But I mean, for instance, Dolce & Gabbana, I know I keep referring to them, but this is a branded residence done well, I think, because what they're going to have is they're going to have a public section outside of the main resort, which will have a little shopping mall, designer shopping mall. It will have, I think, a Dolce & Gabbana beauty salon, which I think will be the first in Europe. It will have a Dolce & Gabbana martini bar. That's great. That's fantastic, because these are, what they're doing is they're creating a destination, a world-class 5-star destination, and your home is going to be a part of this. You're not in a field in the middle of nowhere. So, it's all those things. You've got to read through the spec. You've got to read through the sort of history of the project, why this brand has come on board. Has it come on board just to rescue an ailing development, or has it been there from the start? All these things you've got to look at and take advice on.
It's interesting. I've gone from having not thought about it in much depth, and always been a bit kind of, I don't see the point of it. I don't see myself as a target market, or as a target audience, or for this kind of product. But now I'm beginning to see it. But I can, now I can see that actually all the advantages for both the developer and the potential markets or the buyers, but also it does depend how it's done, clearly, because it can be quite cynical and not much value added, right through to cases where like you said, the heart and soul of the brand is incorporated in the product, and both in terms of the way it looks and the services and how everything's put together. So there can be. But the trick there is, if a brand does add value, you've got to find the brands that are actually genuinely adding value to
exactly. Because trust me, because we're dealing with worldwide established brands, everything is glitzy. The launches of these things, the parties I've been to launching these things have all been amazing and all been world class. But you can get seduced by a bit of razzmatazz. So you've got to, and I went to 2 of these things recently where I sit down for dinner and have this drink and meet so and so, and I just wanted to ask questions, and the question was, okay, where do I see your brand? What how have you and it was kind of like getting blood out of a stone, because all they wanted to do was wine and dine me, and maybe I'm just old and cynical, but I was like, let's cut through that. crap.
Mhm.
Let's talk business, and where's the value of your brand in this product? And some on one occasion I didn't even get an answer because they were so busy trying to wine and dine me. So you've got to be sure that you're not getting seduced by the glamour of it all, and that there is real substance to the offering. Because we can all get seduced. We all get seduced by show homes and fancy cars in showrooms and God knows what. That's life. That's we are seduced by good marketing. But when you're spending a few million, you just got to keep your brain in gear.
Absolutely. Well, that's fantastic. That's very interesting, and I'm glad to. Maybe we should have just dedicated the entire talk to branded resin, because I think there's plenty left to say. Maybe we can have a follow-up. There's bound to be more of this. This is not going to go away. I think we're going to see more of this, so we can review it and see how progress is going, how these things are selling. I don't know whether they're all just being launched or whether some have actually already sold out. And so maybe another time we can talk about not only the value they add on the conceptually, but how these projects, both in the primary and the secondary market, how well they sell off plan or under construction or in hand, and then what's the resale value. I mean, there's a half an hour chat in that for sure.
Oh yeah, and we have I have some of that information already, so happy to share that next time or further down the line. We can have a chat about that. Well, I'm gonna contact Dolce & Gabbana now and get your name down, Mark, for one of their penthouses. Is that okay?
On the waiting list. Deposit. I'll transfer the deposit later.
With a free pair of their skinny jeans. There you go. Anyway, sir, you have a great day. Thank you as always, and I will see you soon. Take care.
Very good. Take care.
Cheers.
Sure.
Bye bye.